Welcome! Today we are doing our third day of stitching for our Be Kind rainbow here, and we're going to be working on a stem stitch today, which is this outside arc. We're going to be using our red or pink color, which is 892, and we're using all 6 strands of floss again. Now we're going to be adding an element of our to our stitching today. So I'm going to start here in the bottom left corner and pull all the way up. And so today we're going to be holding some thread while we do something else. So I'm going to make a nice long stitch here, and then I'm going to pull down into the fabric, but I'm going to keep a loop on the top of the fabric. Then I'm going to come up in between the loop, right on the line, and pull until the floss sits nice on the fabric. And then we're going to repeat, pulling to the same direction every time. So if you had pulled out to the edge of the hoop, you'd pull out to the edge of the hoop again. I'm going to continue to pull down into my hoop so that my hand is out of your way. And then I'm going to make a stitch that is the same length as this stitch, but it's the same length from where my floss is coming from. So from here to my needle point, that is the distance I'm looking for. The other way you could think about it is that it's a half stitch from the end of your previous stitch. So whatever way makes the most sense, we're going to go down into the fabric. Again, pull down, keeping our loop on top, and then we're going to come up right next to that previous stitch, right on the line again. And then we pull down. And then we repeat. Holding our floss out of the way, we go that half stitch length from the end, full stitch length from the floss, pull down, come up, right next to the previous stitch, and pull up. Now we're just going to continue in this method all the way across. Now, as you can see, as I've made a few of these, this is going to be pretty wide as compared to your floss. So you want to make sure that your needle points are closer to the inside of the line as opposed to the outside of the line, so that your line of stitching stays within our shape. Because if we get too far over, we're going to cover up this whole entire little gap we have between our stripes. So I'm just going to make sure that my needle points, ow, I just poked myself, are on the inside edge of that line. You can still see I'm right on it. I'm just making sure that I'm not crossing it into the gap in between. So I'm going to continue stitching, and we will check in at the end of this round across. I've made it all the way to the end of my row, or almost, and you can see that here, this distance, that's my normal stitch length. And so from here to here is going to be my normal stitch length again, and it kind of is a half stitch length here. Usually I try and end on a small space, like a half stitch length or even a little bit less, so that this last stitch as I end just goes down into the fabric. And you can see then the pattern that we were making with our floss continues, and it just flows right into the fabric. Whereas if I had an extra long stitch, it would look a little funny. It would look a little thinner at the end than this nice thick line that we've created. Now we're going to go back the opposite direction, and not much changes really with this. First, I'm going to make sure that I'm over far enough that I'm not dumping all of my stitches out of the way. So it's going to be just, I think, a titch further than I was. Here, that feels good. And then we're going to follow the same method, going back the other way. The key here is that you want to pull your floss the same direction you were pulling it for the first round. So if you're pulling towards the outside of the hoop, you're again going to pull towards the outside of the hoop. I was pulling down towards the middle of my hoop, so I'm going to pull my loops this way. So I'm going to take my first nice big stitch here, and then I come up in between and pull up. Get a little tangle. And then we repeat. Again, that half stitch or full stitch from the thread coming out, and then from the end of our previous stitch. And what you're going to see start to happen if you pull the same direction is that this is going to start to look almost like a braid, because our loops look like they've been pulled in opposite directions. And that is because we are stitching in the other direction. It's kind of a sneaky way to make something look a whole lot more complicated than it is. Now, the most important part is that to make stem stitch, for any given line, you want to stick to the same side for that whole line. You don't necessarily have to worry about the previous line. That's just an added bonus. But for the line you are stitching on, you want to keep pulling to the same side every time. Now I'm going to again keep stitching for a minute, and then I will check in. So here at this other side, you can see that I've got probably a little bit more than a full stitch length to the end. So I'm not going to go all the way to the end. I'm going to leave myself a little bit of space there so that this last stitch can come right here to the bottom. And just like I talked about on that first ending, this will help bring the pattern and the shape of the stitch together at the end. Now, I'm going to try and fit 2 more rounds in. I'm not sure I will be successful. We're going to try it out. A couple of things to think about. First, you want to make sure that you're not pulling your thread too tight. Right here is where you could easily start yanking on it, and that will start to pucker and pull your fabric, which you don't want to do. You just want to gently pull until your fabric, it's not your fabric, your floss sits nice and snug to your fabric. Second thing, you will probably find that you need to end this line of stitching, or end this stitch, I guess, a little bit faster. Faster, oh my goodness, I can't even say those things. What I'm trying to say, you may find that for stem stitch, you need to end your strand of floss a little bit sooner than you would for, let's say, back stitch, because you have to hold your thread out of the way to finish the stitch. So when I need to trade ends of floss, I'm just going to go down where I normally would, but I can't hold the loop on the top. So I'm just going to be gentle as I pull that strand down. I don't want to yank it too tight so that when I start my next strand, I can come out underneath. So I'm going to anchor off, switch strands of floss, and then I will show you how I start again. All right, I've switched to a new strand of floss, not at the end. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to slide my needle out under this strand. From behind, it looks like I'm coming at that spot at an angle, right? Usually I think about putting my needle straight down in. So when I try and come up under from behind, it looks like I'm going in at an angle. So I'm going to continue with this stitch, and we will see how many rows I can fit. All right, I finished line 3, and it looks like I'm going to be able to make 4 lines around. So I'm going to make my 4th row, again pulling down into the center. And then I will be ready to move on to my next line in the rainbow. You're doing an awesome job. Keep stitching.